Hey folks, this is Dr. K, and in this video we're going to talk about creating a table with CSS Grid. And you can see I've already got some HTML for this table. I've got a div with class table. And then I've got these unordered lists. The first one is a header. The second one is a table row. Third one is a table row. So the other ones are table rows. And you can see what this looks like with no styling right here. All right. So I want to turn this into a nice looking table using CSS Grid. So in my style section, I'm going to give this table element here display grid. Okay, so let's do that. Table display grid. All right, and you can see it didn't do very much. That's because I got to tell it what kind of grid to display. I'm going to tell it to display a grid in terms of columns. So let me see. It's grid template columns. Okay, and then what it's asking for here is it wants to know the width of the columns. Okay, so I want there to be 5 columns because I want each of these elements to go in the columns. All right, so right now I'm just going to say 1 FR, give them all a width of FR. 1 FR. And what a FR is, it is a fraction of all the FRs added up. So we've got 1 fraction, 2 fraction, 3 fraction, 4 fraction, 5 fraction. So each of these widths is going to be 1/5 of the total width of all these FR elements. Okay? And so these should all be equal, basically. And I'm going to save this. And all right, so this is good. I don't want this, but it's good that we have this. So you can see what's going on here. What grid does is it takes the children of the grid element, okay, one after the other. And if you're organized into columns, then it puts the first child into the first row, first column, second child, first row, second column, and then it just keeps going until it fills up the row. You've already told it here that we want exactly 5 columns. So it will take the first 5 children and put them in the first 5 columns, and only then will it go to the second row. All right. Now, since we don't even have 5 children here, it's just taking the 4 children. This is the header. And these are table rows. Now, naturally, if this is a table row, we don't want it laid out like this. We actually want this in the first row. If you think of the first row as the header, we want the name book to go in the first row, first column. We want the word title to go in the first row, second column, and so on. And then this should be, all go in the second row in this order. So this is an important to understand what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take these unordered lists, okay? And so we really don't want the unordered lists themselves to go into the grid. We want the list items to go into the grid. All right? So for these unordered lists here, let's just look at a typical table row. These unordered lists, I want to say, don't use me. Don't use the UL as a child of the top level grid. Use the LI. So don't use me, use my children. Okay? and behave as if the LI are direct children of the grid. Okay, so how do we do that? Fortunately, there's a simple CSS command that allows us to do that. So we say for the UL, I want to display contents. Okay, so don't display me, display my contents. And look at that. It just lays out perfectly. Okay, there's the header row and there's the subsequent rows. All right, now I want to get rid of the bullets real quick here. I don't want those, so I'm just going to say list style none, and that'll get rid of my bullets. And now that's looking like a kind of grid I want. And just to kind of emphasize these items in the cells here, I'm going to give them a background color. So let's go ahead and do that. We might take that away again, but let's give the UL, LI, a background color of, let's use aqua here. Okay. And there it is. And you can't really tell that these are individual cells. So I'm also going to go to my table here, or my grid, and I'm going to say give everything a gap of 1 EM. Okay, so now you can tell that these are individual cells, and if you look at the order that the LI appear here in the HTML, look, this is the first LI book. It goes into the first row, first column. This is the second LI title. It goes into the first row, second column. And so on and so forth until we get to subtitle, and the next LI after subtitle is the LI inside this table row, which is image, and then the LI after that is Hound of the Baskerville, and look at this, image, Hound of the Baskervilles. Okay, so it's putting these children in one at a time, and it's treating the LI as the children instead of the UL, because we gave the UL a display type of contents. All right, and you can also see, because we're using FRs, each of these columns is 1 FR in width, and there's a total width of 5 FRs, so each of these columns takes up 1/5 of the total width. So these columns have equal width. All right. But I don't necessarily need them to have equal widths. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them widths that are relative to their content. So I'm going to give them all instead of, oh, and by the way, let me just do this right now because this is kind of irritating. Grid template columns, I got 1 FR all the way over here. All I really have to do here is use this repeat function. Repeat 5 times 1 FR. Okay, and this should not change anything, and it did not. All right, so I'm going to say instead of 1 FR, I want them to all have a width of max content. Now, what max content does is it says make this item, make the width of this column take up the hypothetical maximum that could be in this column. So these columns, I mean, if you look at this column as a whole, okay, it's got book, image, image. The maximum width of any content is this image in brackets. Okay, so really, I'm thinking this column should shrink. Okay, to about near where the end of that bracket is. the text for book is less than the text for bracket image close bracket. So I'm thinking that should shrink. However, this where it says the Hound of the Baskervilles, when you say something has a width of max content, it's usually going to try to write all the text out in one single line, okay, without any wrapping. So you can see right now this wraps, okay, but if as soon as I put max content, it's going to write that all out in one line. Okay, so let me see that. I haven't saved this yet, but as soon as I hit save here, you can see what it did. So most of the column widths shrank except for this second column, because the longest item in this second column was the Hound of the Baskervilles, and that goes out to here. And notice that what Grid is doing, Grid is always trying to keep all the cells in the same column the same width. Okay, so all the cells in this column on column 2 are the same width. All the cells in column 3 are the same width, and likewise for the rows. All the rows have the same height. I mean, you can't really tell because we're not really working with rows that much. We're laying things out in columns, but that's what Grid does. It keeps all the cells in the same column the same width, all the cells in the same row the same height. Okay, what do I want to do now? We've got things laid out in the order we want them laid out. But you know what? I want to show you something. When I shrink this browser, look, when I shrink it, it doesn't even shrink any of these elements. But if I wanted this to be a little bit more responsive, I would actually want this title, since it's so long, I would want this to start wrapping. So one of the things I could do is I could just go back to one FR, then there'd only be one thing that's FR, and then, you know, Grid would use whatever algorithm Grid uses to figure out how long that should be. But I'm going to be a little bit more specific. I'm going to give this a min-max width. And the min-max width will say, here's the maximum and here's the minimum width. I want this. So let's see what happens when I do that. So I'm going to change these grid template columns now. First of all, I'm going to make the first column max content. And I'm going to expand this a little more so you can see what's going on. I'm going to make the second column min-max column, and I'm going to say I don't want it to go below 10 EM, and I don't want it to go above 20 EM. All right, and now I'm going to kind of shrink this again because I want you to see what happens when I save this. So keep your eye on the Hound of the Baskervilles, and keep your eye on this second column because this is the one I changed. All right, so here I go. I'm going to save it now, and look at that, something happened. I'm just not sure what. Okay, but we're gonna find out. It looks like the Hound of the Baskervilles went up here, which is not what I wanted to do. So I'm guessing I must have changed the number of columns here. That's what happens when you change the number of columns. It just, you know, because Grid puts children into, you know, cells one at a time until it finishes the first row, and then wraps around, does it to the second row, et cetera, et cetera. My first thought is I've changed the number of columns. And if I look over here, it looks like, oh, okay, now what happened? I've got one column here, I've got two columns here, and then I've got 5 columns here. So basically I'm saying there should be 7 columns. I don't want 7 columns, I want 5 columns. So I need to change this to 3. Okay, and that'll give the first column max content, second column min-max of 10 and 20, and then the last 3 columns will get max contents. And let's see what happens when I save this. And that's more what I expected. Okay? And look at the Hound of the Baskervilles. It's even longer now. Why is it longer? Probably because it's 20 EM. Okay, I said it could have a maximum of 20 EM. So it's saying, okay, I've got the space, so I'm just going to make this 20 EM. But watch what happens now when I shrink this. Watch the Hound of the Baskervilles. It wraps. It wraps and it stops right here, which is, my guess is that should be 10 EM because that's the minimum width I said. Okay, so that's looking pretty good actually. All right, let's do a couple things here. I've got these gaps here. I don't want this to be a table with all these gaps in it. That kind of annoys me. I want it to be a nice table, and I want it to have some line separators. Okay, but I don't think I want line separators everywhere. I definitely want a line separator at the bottom of the table, and I think I want 2 line separators, one at the top of the header and one at the bottom of the header. So I want a line separator on either side of the header, and I want a line separator at the bottom of the table. So let me try to get that, and I want to get rid of these gaps, but maybe not quite yet. Okay, so I'm going to put a line separator right over the table header, and I'm just going to create a div called line sep. And I'm just going to copy this wherever I need a line separator. Copy this, and I want to put one at the bottom of the header, and I want to put one at the bottom of the last row. I think this is the last row. Okay, it basically, does it do anything? Yes, it actually does something, and it does something I don't want it to do. It actually, let's in particular look at the one right after the header here. Here's what happened. See this space here? That's a space taken up by the line separator. The line separator has no styling now. Let's give it some styling. Okay, let's give the line separator some styling so you can see what's going on here. Dot line sep. I'm going to say the line separator has a height of 2 pixels. And you know what? Actually, I don't like. I found that using pixels actually sometimes it renders weirdly. So now I do like 0.2 EM if I want 2 pixels. And let's do that 2 EM. I just find that renders better for some reason. So let me just put that in there. And I don't see anything happening here. Oh, I didn't give it a background color. Let me give it a background color. Background color, I want it to be dark. Dark gray. I'm going to choose dark slate gray. Okay, so it's nice and dark, and it's 0.2 EM, which is about 2 pixels. And look, basically, there's a line separator here that only goes the width of the one cell. There's a line separator here that only goes the width of the second column. What's happening? Well, what's happening is these line separators are becoming direct children of the grid. So the first thing that the grid adds is this line separator. The second thing that the grid adds is this book. Okay? But I want the line separator to span all the columns. All right? So I'm going to open the developer tools here. Oops, I wasn't on this. Let me open the developer tools in Chrome. And I'm going to go ahead and choose this grid, okay? And I'm going to turn on grid to show the grid. And when you show the grid like this using the developer tools, it basically tells you, look, between each column is a line. At the beginning and the end of each column is a line. All right? And it gives these lines name. So line number 1 is the line before the first column. Line number 2 is the line after the first column and before the second column, and so on and so forth, up to line 6, which is the line that comes after the 5th column. There are 5 columns. And line 6 can also be written -1. Okay, that's just a handy way of getting the last line. All right, and the next to the last line is -2. All right, so what I can do for this line separator, and by default, when things are added to the grid, they always take up one cell. They always take up the next cell in the row until you reach the maximum number of columns, and you go down to the next row, et cetera, et cetera. All right? But what I want to happen with the line separator is I want the line separator to go from line 1 to line 6. But if I change the number of columns to 6 columns later, then this is going to be line 7. So I'm just going to say I want it to go to the first line to the last line. So the first line is the line labeled 1. The last line is the line labeled -1. So I can do that, and this is really cool. So I'm going to turn this off now so that you can see the change in here. So I'm going to say for all line separators, okay, here's my styling of the line separators. So for all line separators, I want a grid column. So I'm going to tell it the grid column I want. And the way I tell it the grid column I want is I say go from this line, and then I put a slash and go to this line. So this basically says I want it to span from line 1, from the first line to the last line, from line 1 to line -1. Line -1 is the last line. All right? I haven't saved this yet, so you're not going to see any change there. But watch what happens here. Okay, here I go. I'm going to save it. Boom, I just saved it. And look at what happened. Isn't that great? Now we got line separators. All right, and they span the length of this. And everything works out with the rows because the line separator spans from the first to the last line. That means the next time an element is added, it's going to be added in the first column, right after the line separator, okay? And there it is. So we've got a nice little header here. And let me just, number 1, I want to get rid of these. I want to get rid of these gaps. They're bothering me. So let me get rid of the gaps here now that we've got lines. Okay, I'm going to save that, and that's what our table looks like. It looks pretty decent. I would still like a little space around these lines. I don't like this harsh color. I want that to go back to white, I think. At least for now. And the lines are a little heavy too, so instead of 0.2 EM, I think I'm going to make them 0.1 EM. That's looking good, and I'd like some space around those lines. I'm not really sure how to put them in. I'm just going to try for now. I'm going to try a margin around these lines. So I'm going to say margin. Let's see, it goes from top, right, bottom, left. Okay, but if I put in a two numbers for the margin, 0 is going to be top. I don't want 0. I want 0.5 EM on the top and the bottom, and I want 0 on the left and the right. Okay, so I'm going to try this, and hopefully it'll add some. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. I really like that. The other thing I want to do is I want to make the elements in the header bold. Okay, so what are the elements in, what's the header? I don't want it to be, I mean, these are the header and the rows are all UL, so I don't want to use UL. The class is table header, so I want to make the text in table header bold. So let's go ahead and do that. Table header. And, one thing I suspect is I'm going to go ahead and add a font weight of bold, and I suspect that this is not going to work. This is not going to do what I want it to do. So here I go. I'm going to save this. Oh, and it did, actually. Okay, so it made everything in the table header bold. Fantastic. One of my problems here is that now that I got rid of that gap, there's not a gap between like quantity and subtotal. And that's not a good thing. That's not what I want. I want some gap there. And I suspect if I put the gap in there, it's going to break these lines. But let me try that. Because you can put a column gap. Okay, you can put a column gap without putting a row gap. So let's go ahead and do that. There's the table. And let's do column gap. Let's put a 1 EM, and here I'm going to save it. And it looks like it didn't break those lines, which is kind of a surprise to me. I guess if these were a certain color, it would break the color if the items were certain colors, but since it's all white, the gap looks good, and I'm kind of surprised that it didn't break the line separators, but I'm going to leave that for now. Okay, so let's see. Is this where I want to finish up? No, I'm not quite done here. What I want is everything by default is the text is left justified, but I want the quantity to be centered in its column, and I want the subtotal. I want both prices. I want the price and the subtotal to be right justified. Amounts should always be justified on cents. Like dollar amounts should always be justified on cents. So that means I need to make these right justified. So let's do that. So what I want to do, I have to, I haven't named these columns, and I'm not going to. I'm not sure how, but I think there might be a way. But in any case, this is my first column, second column, third column, fourth column, fifth column. So I want the fourth column, the text to be centered, and I want the third and the fifth column, the text to be right justified. So let me do the quantity first. That's the fourth column. So I'm going to do, let's see. That's basically the fourth bullet, because the fourth column is all bullets, so they're in a list, right? So that's the fourth LI in every UL I have, because the header's a UL and these rows are ULs. So I'm going to say UL. So for all the UL, the LI, where the LI is the nth child of type. Oh, the nth of type. Okay, so I'm going to say for every LI that is the fourth child of its type, so in case there are children that are not LIs, this will work. So that is the fourth child of its type. I want that to be centered. So I want a text align center. Okay, and I'm hoping that this will center this fourth column, since all of my rows are ULs and all of my items are LI. Okay, so here I'm going to save it. Let's keep an eye on the quantity, and it centered it. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to do the same for the third column and the fifth column, except I'm going to right justify those. So UL LI nth of type 3, comma UL, so comma is and, so not only that for that selection, but and for UL LI nth of type 5. So for the third column and the fifth column, I want text align to be right. Let's keep an eye on these numbers. It won't be as obvious a change as I think this one, but you should see these go to the end here. Here I'm going to save it, and that's exactly what happens. In fact, it's kind of hard to see for this one, but if you look, this is a 699, 1099, and it is indeed centered on the these decimal places do align. So that is fantastic. And you can do other things, like you can give this header background a color. Let me see if I can give that like a light gray or something like that. Where is table header? I got the font weight bold, background color. What if I just put gray? What's that look like? I'm gonna save it. Oops, that's weird. So that's interesting. So I gave it a background color of gray, but I didn't see that up here. And that is my table header. That is a UL, right? Let me just check on that. Yep, that's UL with class table header. Is that dot table header? Yeah, that's dot table header. So, you know, sometimes I don't get the results I want with this. Like even I think I mentioned I wasn't sure if it would make this bold. But sometimes you have to apply this to the children. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make I'm just going to apply all this stuff to the children. So table header, the LIs underneath, directly underneath the table header, I want to give them a font weight of bold and make the background color gray. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to save it. So actually did the right thing, but because I have these gaps in here, it's it's not filling the gaps, okay, so to speak, which is not good. Okay, so actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the gaps, and I'm just going to make that up by saying, okay, I'm going to save it, see what it looks like. And it got rid of the gaps everywhere. I'm just going to put some padding on the left of all these LI just to make up for it. So any essentially UL followed by LI is going to have some left padding. I don't know if this will carry over the gray and all that stuff. So left padding of 1 EM. Let me see if that. Here I'm going to save it. Oh, this should be padding left. Sorry, padding left. And here I'm going to save it. Okay, that looks good because the color stays there now, and that's pretty much what I wanted. This is aligned more or less center. Yes, there's this 1 EM of padding there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. This is aligned right. I'm going to say this looks good to me. Okay, except I've got black on pretty much dark gray. I thought that would be a lighter gray. Let me see if I just make that light gray. LIGHT. Let me see what light gray looks like. Yeah. Now, the problem is, this is pretty good, but the problem is that there's this space here above the line separator. So I don't mind the space here because it's white, okay? But I want this gray to go all the way down. And offhand, I don't know how to, I kind of have some ideas how to do it, but I'm not sure. So how would I fix this up? I would fix this up by, I like the height of the header. I would try some way to bring that gray all the way down to there in the header. I don't know how yet, but I have some ideas. The other thing I would play around with, I would toy with the idea of making every other row a different color. Okay? I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you guys. I could probably do it if I messed around with it long enough, but you know, I want to keep this a relatively short video, even though I know I've already violated that. But anyway, I think that is a good place to stop. I think that gives you an idea of the power of Grid and the ability to use it to make tables, whereas previously we would have used HTML tables. Okay, that's it for this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.